On the morning of the disaster, Adrian Trask had been nursing a cup of synthetic coffee while reading about the latest breakthroughs in asteroid mining techniques. The station's artificial gravity hummed in the background, steady as ever. He was one of 50 human researchers on Kelrad 7, an outpost orbiting close to the hazardous nebula vortex. The nebula was notorious for its unpredictable radiation storms, but Kelrad 7 was supposedly equipped with state-of-the-art shielding. It was during the station's weekly safety drill that the alarms went off for real. Not the crisp, repetitive blare of a simulated emergency, but the angry, discordant wail that sent a chill down everyone's spine. Radiation breach detected, the AI announced in its eerily calm tone. All personnel to shelter pods immediately. The words sent everyone scrambling. Adrian had just enough time to glance out the observation window before sprinting for the nearest pod. The nebula was a swirling chaos of blue and green energy, much closer than it should have been. Something had gone wrong with the station's orbital stabilizers. By the time he reached the pod, Adrian was out of breath. The tiny chamber filled quickly, and the hatch hissed shut. The AI continued its monotone updates. Shielding compromised. Radiation levels rising. Adrian felt the pod jolt as it detached from the station. Through the small viewport, he watched Kelrad 7 erupt in a cascade of flames, swallowed by the nebula's radiation storm. His stomach sank. He thought of his mother, safely on Earth, and wondered if he'd ever see her again. The pod's shielding was meant to protect them until rescue, but as minutes turned into hours, Adrian began to feel off. The others in the pod grew pale and weak, some losing consciousness. But Adrian felt a strange, prickling sensation under his skin, like static electricity. When he pressed a hand to his chest, his heartbeat seemed too strong, almost unnatural. 12 hours later, the rescue ship arrived. Medics pulled the survivors from the pod, but they hesitated when they reached Adrian. "Vitals are." "Unusual," one murmured. "What does that mean?" Adrian croaked, his voice raspier than he remembered. "You're stable, but we need to run tests," the medic replied, avoiding his gaze. Adrian spent the next 3 days in isolation aboard the rescue ship. A series of doctors came and went, poking and prodding. No one would tell him much, only that his body was exhibiting anomalies. Meanwhile, the other survivors were deteriorating rapidly. Out of 50 researchers, only 5 had survived the radiation storm, and Adrian was the only one who seemed unharmed. On the 4th day, Commander Orlin, a brusque officer with a no-nonsense demeanor, visited Adrian in his isolation chamber. "Trask, we need to talk," she said, sitting down across from him. Finally, Adrian muttered, "What's going on? Why am I the only one who's fine?" Orlin took a deep breath. "You're not entirely fine, and we think we know why." She slid a tablet across the table. On it was a scan of Adrian's body. His skeletal structure looked human enough, but the scan highlighted strange anomalies in his cellular makeup. "What am I looking at?" Adrian asked, his stomach tightening. "You've got non-human DNA," Orlin said bluntly. "We're still trying to identify its origins, but, well, your cells are regenerating in ways we've never seen. The radiation didn't kill you because your body adapted to it almost instantly." Adrian stared at the screen, his mind racing. "That's impossible. I'm human. My mother's human." "What about your father?" Orlin pressed. Adrian opened his mouth, then closed it again. He'd never known his father. His mother had always been vague about him, saying he'd left when Adrian was a baby. "I don't know," he admitted, "but my mother never mentioned anything alien." "Maybe she didn't know," Orlin suggested. "We've seen cases of interspecies hybrids before, but they're extremely rare. Usually the alien traits are dormant." Adrian leaned back, rubbing his temples. "This can't be happening." "I get it." "It's a lot to process," Orlin said, her tone softening. "But we need to figure out what you are. Your survival might hold the key to protecting humans from radiation like this in the future." Back on Earth, Adrian's first stop was his mother's small house in the countryside. He hadn't told her about the radiation storm or his newfound. Differences, but she greeted him with a bone-crushing hug, her face lit up with relief. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Almost Adrian said, his voice thick. He hesitated before asking Mom, "Can we talk about Dad?" She pulled back, her expression guarded. "What about him? I need to know. Anything. Where he came from, who he really was." Her brow furrowed. "Adrian, I've told you everything I know. He was mysterious, sure. He didn't talk much about his past, but he seemed normal. Kind. Until he left." "Did he ever seem different, like not human?" His mother frowned, clearly puzzled. "Not human? No. Why would you ask that?" Adrian sighed. "Because I survived something I shouldn't have, and the doctors think it's because of my DNA. They said it's not entirely human." Her face paled and she sank into a chair. I don't understand. He never said anything about being not human." "Do you remember where he was from?" Adrian pressed. "Did he ever mention a planet or anything unusual?" She shook her head, then hesitated. "He used to talk about a place he called Virexel. Said it was the most dangerous place in the galaxy, but he never explained why. I thought it was a joke." Adrian felt a chill run down his spine. The name Virexel was vaguely familiar, something he'd heard in passing during his time on Kelrad 7. It was rumored to be a toxic wasteland, uninhabitable to most life forms. "I need to find out more," he said, determination hardening his voice. "Adrian, whatever you're thinking, please be careful," his mother said, her voice trembling. "I already lost your father. I can't lose you too." "I'll be fine," he promised, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. The next day, Adrian contacted Commander Orlin. "I think I know where my father might have been from," he told her. "Virexel." There was a long pause before Orlin replied, "If you're serious about this, we can arrange transport." "But Adrian, Virexel isn't just dangerous, it's deadly." "Not for me," Adrian said grimly. "At least I hope not." Adrian stepped off the ship onto the surface of Virexel, his boots crunching against an alien landscape of jagged, crystalline ground that shimmered faintly under a dull, greenish sky. The air shimmered with toxins, the kind that could kill most life forms in seconds. He wasn't wearing a protective suit, and though he felt an odd tickle in his lungs, it wasn't anything close to suffocating. The landing crew, clad head to toe in reinforced hazmat suits, exchanged uneasy glances as they set up a temporary base camp. "You sure you're all right?" Trask, one of them, a tech officer named Marlin, asked, her voice muffled through her suit's comm system. "I'm fine," Adrian replied. He inhaled deeply, almost to prove it. The air was acrid and metallic, but it didn't seem to harm him. If anything, it felt invigorating, like a jolt of pure adrenaline. Marlin muttered something under her breath and turned back to her instruments. Adrian caught the words "not human" and chose to ignore them. The crew had only 2 hours to collect samples and data before the toxicity levels in their suits would surpass safe limits. Adrian had no such restrictions, which was precisely why Commander Orlin had authorized his presence on this mission. If he could survive Virexel, maybe he could uncover the secret to his own resilience and the truth about his father. As the crew fanned out to collect samples, Adrian's focus shifted to the horizon. Jagged cliffs loomed in the distance, their edges glowing faintly with a strange bioluminescence. Something about them tugged at him, an inexplicable pull that felt almost like instinct. "I'm going to scout ahead," he said over the comm channel. "Not too far," Marlin cautioned. "If something happens to you, we're not equipped for a rescue." Adrian nodded, though he doubted anything on this planet could hurt him. He began walking, the eerie landscape stretching out before him. The crystalline ground seemed to hum faintly beneath his feet, resonating with his every step. As he approached the cliffs, the sensation grew stronger, almost like a vibration in his chest. When he reached the base of the cliffs, he spotted an opening, a narrow cave entrance, partially hidden by jagged rock formations. The air around it was noticeably warmer, and the hum he'd been feeling turned into a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat. "Trask to base," he said into his comm. "I've found something. A cave." Do not go in there alone, Marlin's voice crackled back, laced with frustration. I don't think I have a choice, Adrian replied, his feet already moving toward the entrance. Something's calling me. He stepped inside, the dim light of the outside world fading as he ventured deeper. The walls of the cave glowed faintly, etched with intricate patterns that looked almost like writing. He couldn't decipher it, but it felt familiar, as if it were etched into the very fibers of his being. The cave opened into a vast chamber, its center dominated by a crystalline structure that pulsed with the same rhythm he'd been feeling since he landed. The air here was thick, but instead of choking him, it seemed to fill him with energy. His skin tingled, his senses heightened. As he approached the crystal, he felt a sudden jolt, a flash of images and sensations that weren't his own. A tall figure with elongated features standing on a similar crystalline surface. A world teeming with life, its sky blazing with color. And then, destruction. Fire and ash. The figure fleeing to a ship, carrying something precious. The images faded, leaving Adrian gasping for air. He fell to his knees, his hands pressed against the ground. When he looked up, he saw a figure emerging from the crystal, a translucent, humanoid shape that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Adrian Trask, it said, its voice reverberating in his mind rather than his ears. You carry the legacy of Virexel. Adrian's mouth went dry. What are you? I am an echo of this planet's last guardian, the figure replied. A fragment of what once was. My father, Adrian blurted out. Was he from here? The figure studied him for a long moment. Yes, he was one of us. But he chose to leave, to protect what remained of our legacy. You are the result of his union with an Earthborn, a blend of two worlds. Adrian's mind reeled. Why didn't he stay? Why didn't he tell me any of this? The burden of his choice weighed heavily on him, the figure said. He knew that his presence on your world would draw attention, danger. He left to shield you and your mother. Adrian clenched his fists. And what about me? Why am I like this? You are more than human, the figure said. Your resilience, your ability to survive this planet, these are gifts from your Virexelian heritage. But they are also a responsibility. Responsibility, Adrian echoed. For what? To protect, the figure said simply. Our people are gone, but our knowledge, our essence remains. You are the bridge between two worlds. What you do with that is up to you. The figure began to fade, its translucent form dissolving into the air. Wait, Adrian called out. There's so much I don't understand. Seek the answers within yourself, the figure said, its voice growing faint. And remember, what you are is not a curse. It is a gift. The crystal stopped pulsing, and the cave fell silent. Adrian sat there for a long time, his thoughts racing. He didn't feel gifted. He felt lost. But he also felt a spark of something else, determination. When he finally emerged from the cave, the crew was waiting for him, their expressions a mix of relief and frustration. What the hell were you thinking? Marlin snapped. You were gone for almost an hour. I found answers, Adrian said, his voice steadier than he expected, and now I need to figure out what to do with them. Adrian spent the return journey from Virexel in a quiet storm of thought. The others gave him space, either out of unease or respect. They didn't know what to make of him, and truthfully, neither did he. The crew kept busy analyzing the samples they'd collected, their murmured conversations punctuated by furtive glances in his direction. Adrian ignored them, staring out at the void of space, his mind consumed with questions. When they arrived back at the orbital hub, Commander Orlin was waiting. Her sharp gaze zeroed in on Adrian the moment he stepped off the shuttle. Walk with me, she ordered, not bothering with pleasantries. Adrian followed her through the bustling station, the sounds of clattering tools and overlapping conversations fading as they entered a quieter corridor. Orlin stopped outside a secure debriefing room and motioned for him to enter. Inside, the walls were lined with glowing panels, each displaying snippets of data from Virexel. Orlin closed the door behind them and turned to face him. Let's hear it, she said. What happened down there? Adrian hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. The memory of the crystalline figure's words lingered in his mind. Protect, legacy, gift. It all sounded so monumental, so far beyond anything he felt capable of. But he knew hiding the truth wouldn't help. There's something on Virexel, he began, a presence. It called itself the last guardian of the planet. It said my father was from there, that I'm part Virexelian. Orlin raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt, her expression unreadable. It said the planet's people are gone, but their knowledge is still there, Adrian continued, and that I have a responsibility to protect it. Orlin leaned against the table, crossing her arms. Protect it from what? I don't know, Adrian admitted. But whatever it is, I think it's tied to why my father left Virexel. He must have known something was coming. Orlin tapped her fingers against her arm, her gaze narrowing. We've intercepted chatter about your survival. Certain factions are curious about why you're still alive. If what you're saying is true, and you're the only living connection to Virexel, you've just painted a target on your back. Adrian's stomach tightened. Who's interested? Orlin sighed. Governments, corporations, even rogue factions. The idea of a human who can survive lethal radiation. That's not something they'll ignore. Some will want to study you. Others might want to weaponize whatever it is that makes you tick. Adrian rubbed his temples. The weight of the revelation was already heavy enough without the added threat of becoming a galactic prize. So what do I do? Orlin studied him for a long moment. You're going to have to figure out where you stand in all this. And fast. But first, we need to ensure you're not walking into an ambush. For now, stay here on the station. We'll keep you off the radar while we gather intel. Over the next few days, Adrian delved into research about Virexel, its history, and its people, or rather, what little was known about them. Most of the information was speculative, sourced from explorers who'd barely survived brief forays onto the planet. The descriptions were consistent, though a hostile environment, strange crystalline structures, and the persistent hum of energy that seemed to permeate everything. One report caught his attention. It mentioned a relic found on the planet, a fragment of crystalline material that had been brought to a research lab on Olier 3 before vanishing under mysterious circumstances. The lab was subsequently destroyed in what was officially labeled as a containment failure, though rumors suggested sabotage. Adrian's instincts told him the relic was important. If the energy he'd felt on Virexel was part of his legacy, then this fragment might hold the key to understanding it. He brought the information to Orlin during one of their briefings. I think I need to go to Olier 3, he said. Orlin frowned. That's deep in unregulated space. If there's a lead, it's risky. You'd be out of range of our support. Adrian nodded. I know. But if this relic is connected to Virexel, it might help me figure out what I'm supposed to do. Orlin sighed heavily. Fine. But you're not going alone. Marlin's volunteered to accompany you. Adrian blinked in surprise. Marlin? She barely trusts me. Which makes her perfect, Orlin said with a smirk. She won't hesitate to keep you in check if this connection of yours starts leading you into trouble. The trip to Olier 3 was tense. Marlin barely spoke, her distrust of Adrian palpable. She focused on piloting the small vessel, her hands flying over the controls with practiced ease. When they arrived at the planet, the ruins of the research lab were stark against the barren landscape. The building had been reduced to a charred skeleton, its walls blackened and crumbling. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of ash and decay. Adrian felt the hum of energy again, faint but unmistakable, guiding him deeper into the wreckage. This place is a death trap, Marlin muttered, scanning the area with her handheld detector. Radiation levels are still high. Adrian ignored her, his focus sharpening as he followed the pull. They reached a collapsed section of the lab, where shards of the crystalline relic glittered among the debris. Adrian crouched down, his fingers brushing against the fragments. The moment he touched them, his vision blurred. Another flash of images and sensations flooded his mind. A device being activated, its energy spreading out like ripples in water. The device shattering. Chaos. When his vision cleared, he realized Marlin was staring at him, her face pale. You were glowing, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. What Adrian looked down at his hands, which were tingling faintly. You touched those shards and, your body lit up like a beacon. She glanced nervously at the entrance. If anyone was tracking us, they definitely know we're here now. Before Adrian could respond, the hum of energy grew louder. The fragments began to vibrate, and the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, resonant voice echoed through the ruins, speaking a language Adrian didn't understand. But he felt the words in his bones, their meaning clear. The legacy must be preserved. The unworthy will not claim it. Adrian's heart pounded. He wasn't sure if the voice was warning him or welcoming him. Adrian stepped onto the ship with Marlin following close behind. The crystalline relic in his hand pulsed faintly, its energy no longer overwhelming but quietly reassuring, like a heartbeat syncing with his own. The hum of the engines starting up filled the cabin as the two settled into their seats. Marlin leaned against the bulkhead, eyeing him warily. "So, what's the plan now, Mr. Alien Hybrid?" Adrian glanced at her, then down at the relic. For the first time, the answer felt clear. We take this back to Earth. If I'm going to protect it, I need to understand it. And I need people I can trust to help me. Marlin snorted. Trust? Good luck with that. After what just happened, half the galaxy probably knows about that thing and about you. Adrian exhaled deeply. Yeah, but I've got to start somewhere. My father didn't abandon this legacy, he passed it on to me. If I don't stand up now, then everything he sacrificed was for nothing. Marlin stared at him for a long moment before sighing. Fine. Just don't expect me to start calling you Guardian Trask or anything. I'm not that sentimental. Adrian smiled faintly. Noted. As the ship broke through Oliar 3's atmosphere and into the vast emptiness of space, the comm crackled to life. Commander Orlan's voice came through, calm but with a sharp undertone of urgency. Trask, we've got incoming reports from the network. That skirmish on Oliar 3 didn't go unnoticed. I'm picking up chatter about you and that relic multiple factions are mobilizing. Adrian's grip tightened on the relic. Then we don't have much time. I'm bringing it to Earth. We'll secure it there. Orlan hesitated. Adrian, this isn't just about the relic. You're part of this now. Your unique biology, your connection to Virexol. They're not going to stop coming after you, even if you lock that thing in the deepest vault on Earth. I know, Adrian said firmly, but I'm not running. I'm done hiding from what I am. The silence on the comm lasted just long enough for him to wonder if Orlan disagreed. Then her voice returned, softer but resolute. All right, I'll arrange for secure transport and contact the Earth Defense Coalition. If anyone can help you figure this out, it's them. As the ship set its course, Adrian leaned back in his seat, the weight of the day finally settling over him. He thought about the translucent figure's words, his father's decision to leave Virexol, and the knowledge now coursing through his veins. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about purpose. Marlin broke the silence. So what's the endgame here, Trask? You plan to save the galaxy with your shiny space rock. Adrian looked at the relic in his hand, its glow reflecting faintly in his eyes. No, just the people who need it most. My father gave me this so I could do what he couldn't. I'm not going to let him or anyone else down. The journey back to Earth was uneventful, but tension lingered in the air. When they arrived, Orlan met them at the landing site. A team of scientists and security personnel was already waiting, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. Adrian handed the relic over to Orlan, who placed it in a containment device designed to suppress its energy signature. He felt a pang of loss as its presence dimmed, but he knew it was necessary. You did good, Trask Orlan said as she secured the device. Now it's our job to make sure this doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Adrian nodded, his gaze steady, and mine to make sure I'm ready for whatever comes next. Months later, Adrian found himself standing on a secure observation platform deep beneath the Earth's surface. The relic was housed in a reinforced chamber, surrounded by layers of shielding and monitoring equipment. Scientists worked tirelessly to unravel its mysteries, and though progress was slow, Adrian felt a growing sense of clarity. His connection to the relic wasn't just physical, it was emotional, even spiritual. The energy of Virexel wasn't just a tool, it was a reminder of resilience, of survival against impossible odds. And as long as Adrian carried that within him, he knew he wasn't alone. Marlin appeared at his side, holding 2 cups of coffee. Figured you could use this, she said, handing him one. Thanks, Adrian said, taking a sip. The synthetic brew was bitter, but comforting. So Marlin said, leaning on the railing. What now? You gonna hang out here and babysit your space rock forever? Adrian chuckled. Not exactly, but I think I'll stay involved. If Virexel's legacy is about protecting people, then that's what I'm going to do, wherever that takes me. Marlin nodded, her expression softening. Well, just don't get yourself killed. You're annoying, but I've kind of gotten used to you. Adrian smiled. I'll do my best. For the first time in what felt like forever, Adrian felt at peace. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a direction. The legacy of Virexel wasn't a burden, it was a chance to make a difference, and he wasn't going to waste it.